Good morning, everyone. It's Sunday, August 4th. In studio with us this morning, Massachusetts Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley. Let's go on the record.
From WCVB Channel 5, the inside word from Washington to Beacon Hill. Today's newsmakers are going on the record.
Very good morning to you, everyone, and welcome to OTR for this Sunday. I'm Ed Harding, along with News Center 5's political reporter Janet Wu. And our guest this morning is Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley. The Progressive Democrat was elected in November to represent the state's 7th district. Before that, she served in the Boston City Council, winning an at-large seat in 2009. She attended BU. She lives in Dorchester, and she's one of the most talked about Congress people in the world right now. So thanks for joining us.
Thanks for making time to be here with us. We really appreciate it.
It is good to be home. It's already been quite the welcome home. So
let's dive right into it. Racism is going to be one of the biggest issues in next year's presidential campaign. After listening to President Trump attack entire cities like Baltimore and legislators like you specifically, and listening to the Democrats who want to run against him, who makes the most convincing argument to bring out new voters, specifically voters of color, in next year?
I think that case is still being made. I do want to say that I do agree with some of the sentiments that were expressed on the stage by a couple of the candidates that anyone on that stage would be better than the current occupant of this White House. I'm very proud of the bench that we've put forward, the caliber of candidates, but I do want to caution us. I mean, there are two things that are happening that I find dangerous. The first is we are starting to parrot and to believe Republican talking points about who we are. I had the good fortune recently at a Democratic retreat where our former governor, Deval Patrick, spoke to my colleagues and I, and he said, you know, we're in trouble when we start to believe the Republican talking points. And this is what I see playing out on the debate stage. And the second is, I reject the premise that we have to make any false choices about whether or not to energize our base or whether or not to try to recapture working class white voters. This is a false choice. And so that is what I'm watching and that I'm worried about. If there's anything that's going to suppress a vote and keep people home, it's when we are parroting Republican talking points, and whether that's about immigration reform or whether it's about health care or whether it's about identity politics. And I just reject the false choices that we continue to put forward.
So I guess that leads me to the question, are you saying, in other words, the Cory Bookers and the Kamala Harrises should not be going after Joe Biden so heavily about his past, about things that happened maybe 20 years ago?
Well, first of all, I just want to say that the conversation about racial justice is not one that should be disproportionately the burden and the responsibility of that only by the candidates of color that are in the race. The country is at an inflection point. We are at a crossroads. The occupant of this White House and his administration, both with their tweets and with their policies, are emboldening nativism, white supremacy, and hate. This is the responsibility of every single person, and I think, you know, candidates are coming to the stage prepared to be competitive and to make their case, and that's what they're supposed to do.
Do you believe the president's a racist?
Yes, I do. Absolutely. Yeah.
Let's talk and let's talk about his.
But I just want to say this, though. I don't think he's the racist because of the vitriol that he spews. Okay, I think and know that he's a racist based on a pattern of behavior that began well before he was the occupant of this White House. Everything from leading the charge of birtherism to denying rental units to African Americans to calling for capital punishment and death penalty for who we now know today are the exonerated 5 from the Central Park rape.
And yet the president will talk about, he'll say African American jobs are the unemployment rate is the lowest.
Actually, he doesn't even say African Americans. He says the blacks. I find his at this point it is fatiguing, the level of venom and vitriol and racist rhetoric, but I'm not allowing that to distract me from the real work and the real harm that this administration is causing with racist and hurtful policies. I can't obsess about tweets when I need to be focused on the impact of more than hateful and hurtful rhetoric, but hateful and hurtful and draconian policies.
You traveled to Hempstead, Florida. Did you go to Hempstead, Florida? Where'd you go to look at?
I went to El Paso, Texas.
El Paso, Texas. That's where
yes,
you went. The president claims that he's rescinded policies separating children from families, but clearly that hasn't stopped. What, if anything, is Congress, specifically the House, willing to do at this point?
Well, the House continues to do its job. Mitch McConnell and the Senate are not doing theirs. You know, what I know is that I can't even say it's typical to say that the system is broken, but I think actually the system is doing what it was designed to do. And so that means that the system is fundamentally flawed, and we need a system that works, that is compassionate, that is humane, that prioritizes families staying together. After all, seeking asylum is a legal and a human right. And that is much more in keeping with, we're losing our world, our standing in the globe. We are supposed to be a place of refuge and a beacon of hope. And migrant families fleeing poverty and violence should be able to settle into community, to keep their families together while awaiting a ruling on their case. And might I add that 80% of these families have family members that live here. So they already have sponsors that they could be connected with and settling in community with.
Now, you were one of the few that voted against giving more money for border control. Have you been watching where the money is being spent, and are you planning to watch it very carefully, especially since you voted against it?
Well, absolutely, and I have the good fortune of serving under the leadership of Chairman Elijah Cummings on the Oversight and Reform Committee, and we did have a hearing, and it was in the oversight space after our border visit, where we were able to enter into congressional record what we observed there. And I took that vote because I conferred with my district. Look, I work in Washington, but I answer to and I work for the people of the Massachusetts 7th. And this is a district that is 40% immigrant. The fear and the abuse of power is not hyperbole, it's not imagined. We have seen the overreach of ICE right here in the Massachusetts 7th, and that fear is palpable. And I think ultimately I took a vote, I know that I did, that was in keeping with the leadership of our district, from our mayors to our Suffolk County DA, to our Attorney General. We are one of the most vulnerable people. Focus on the border communities, but the Massachusetts 7th is 40% immigrant. So
let's talk about the death penalty. The Trump administration has brought it back after 16 years. You've are trying to ban it, but what kind of chances or what hope do you think you have, considering the Senate?
Well, I'm an eternal optimist, and you know, at the end of the day, I think it's incumbent upon us to lead and to legislate on those issues of care and concern to the American people, and certainly Massachusetts 7th. I'm not surprised by this move, by this administration. It's very consistent, but I'm pushing for this and am already gaining some support on it. I don't think that because the Senate doesn't want to do their job that we should recuse our responsibility to continue to lead. And when we do take back the Senate and we do take back the White House, we will have created a new floor on these issues. For me, given how flawed our criminal justice system is, and the racial biases, and just how unpredictable. It's not reliable. We know that for every 10 people that have been sentenced to death, one of them has ultimately been found innocent. And those are just awful odds. And as someone who really strives to do this work from a space that is victim-centered, so many of the families that I've consulted and conferred with who have been robbed of their loved one due to a heinous act, this is not what they want either. It doesn't bring their loved one back.
I wanted to mention, you mentioned working with the Senate. You and Senator Cory Booker have introduced an idea being labeled the baby bond bill. Can you explain what that is so people can understand what that is?
Sure. Well, and I also just want to say that to your point about the Senate, and I should have made this earlier, you know, I've been in Congress for 6 months, and as a freshman, I've already been the lead author of 10 pieces of legislation and co-sponsored probably 130 bills and written and passed about 10 amendments. But all of those bills, the lion's share of them, not all of them, but many of them, I was intentional about getting a Senate sponsor, doing these bills and legislating in a way that's bicameral to increase the likelihood of them being moved.
And have you been successful on that point, in that way?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, my very first bill with United States Senator Tina Smith out of Minnesota was to provide back pay for federally contracted third-party service workers, custodians, food service workers, security workers who were not made whole after the federal government shutdown. And I was able to get that into our appropriations package. Senator Booker and I have partnered on maternal mortality. I should say say that I am in consultation with the policy shops of all the Senate 2020ers. I have introduced legislation with Senator Warren. I'm working on some things with Senator Harris. And this is the second thing that Senator Booker and I are doing. The first was on maternal mortality.
The bond
the
is the
Healthy
second thing. The
Mommies
baby
Act.
bond is the second
Baby
thing?
bonds is the second. And basically, it's just about, it's not a reparations bill, but I do see it in some ways as enhancement and companion legislation that gets at income inequality and the racial wealth gap. What it means is just that every child, when they are born, will have a seed account, a baby bond that
Regardless of what family they come from.
every
Regardless of
family
economics. Yep.
and that will accrue over time. It's tied to family income. So those families that are disproportionately in the bottom, then they will earn more.
We continue with Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley in just a minute. Stay with us.